Crater Lake. To me, it's the most interesting and mysterious lake in the United States. It's also a national park that's located in Klamath County, Oregon. It's named Crater Lake because the ridge of the lake resembles a crater. It looks half filled with no shores because it formed a caldera after the volcanic explosion of Mount Mazama over 7,700 years ago. And it's the deepest lake in the whole United States at a maximum depth of 1,949 feet. It's also 5 by 6 miles long, surrounded by steep cliffs where people can't even swim other than a small section they can only access from the Fleetwood Cove Trail, which is an hour-long hike down and a strenuous hike back up. It's only open to the public during the summer because it gets pretty cold the rest of the year. Also, the water is really blue, extra blue. But why is this lake so mysteriously mystic? Let's take a better look and find out. Backstories, ladies and gentlemen. Before the lake was even formed, there was a volcano called Mount Mazama, and the surrounding land was inhabited by the Klamath tribe. Around 7,700 years ago, the volcano erupted, which collapsed the mountain in forming a caldera floor. And according to the Klamath legend, is described as a battle between the sky god Skell and the god of the underworld Lao, also named for a famous rock on the lake. But during the battle, they said Skell dismembered Lao's body and threw it in the lake, while monsters gobbled up everything but the head, and Lao's spirit still haunts the lake today. The eruption also formed Wizard Island, Marion Cone, Phantom Ship, and other volcanic features on the caldera-covered floor. And as the caldera cooled down, the rain and snow filled up over time, forming the lake. And they estimate it took about 720 years to fill to its death. It looks like there was still a lot more to go since the water's far below the calderan cliffs.
Thousands of years ago, Mount Mazama, a 3,700-meter volcanic mountain, covered the Crater Lake site. Beneath the mountain was a large chamber of magma, a collection of gas and molten rock. In a tremendously powerful eruption more than 6,000 years ago, cracks opened beneath the volcano and drained away several cubic kilometers of molten material. The weight of the volcanic cone then collapsed into the emptied chamber, leaving behind a great basin, a caldera. The caldera later filled with water, and Crater Lake was created.
But with no active rivers flowing, the water takes about 250 years to recycle itself. Scientists say a steady seepage maintains the water balance, as water seeps out the caldera's walls at a rate of about 2 million gallons an hour. And that's the mystery scientists are still studying, because they don't know where all the water goes, seeing as there's no paths, springs, or other water sources found to carry the same water as the lake. The natives called the lake Giwas, and they used to carry out vision quests with dangerous missions climbing the cliffs, and those who completed them were considered to have spiritual powers. The tribe still considers the lake to be a very spiritual site, and seeing that the location of the lake is in the southwest region of Oregon on the crest of the Cascade Mountain, there wasn't many people, if anyone, but the natives who passed through there for almost its entire existence. Then in the spring of 1853, the first official non-natives discovered the lake on accident when they were searching for a legendary gold mine called the Last Cabin, and those 3 men were named John Wesley Hillman, Henry Clipple, and Isaac Skeeter, who called it the bluest lake they ever seen. And that's because the way the sun hits the water molecules, making blue light form reflected from beneath so you could see it from the surface. Oddly enough, the story also goes that Hillman, who was excited thinking they were about to find a cabin, ran quickly along the cliffs with his horse, and the horse slipped off, causing both of them to fall to their deaths. The crew never ended up finding the cabin, but decided to call the lake the Deep Blue Lake. And a couple years later, a man called Sergeant Orson Stearns came to check it out and was the first non-native to climb down the caldera and reach the shore. He suggested calling the lake Lake Majesty until 1869. Newspaper editor Jim Sutton, along with the help of several others, were the first to lower a canvas bone into the lake, and they finally settled on an official name with Crater Lake because of the crater peak on the top of Wizard Island, which is the cone-shaped island on the west end of the lake. Wizard Island is actually named after its resemblance to a sorcerer's hat, and it stands nearly 7,000 feet above sea level and rises 755 feet above the average surface of the lake. There's also an underwater cinder cone in the northeast part of the lake called the Marion Cone, considered to be the volcanic sister clone of Wizard Island. with 3 other smaller underwater cones scientists say are volcanoes that grew while the lake was filling over 5,000 years ago. However, there is one more spooky looking small island on the southeast end. Looks like a ghost ship, and it's properly named Phantom Ship Island, standing 160 feet above the surface, and depending on the lighting and weather, it disappears from visibility from time to time like a true ghost. Moving on, in 1885 there was a man named William Gladstone Steele who was obsessed with the lake and spent 17 years along with his life fortune to make the lake and its surroundings a national park. So in May 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt officially signed a bill to make Crater Lake the nation's 6th national park. And with that, between 1888 and 1942, 5 species of fish were introduced by scientists. They say about 60,000 trout and salmon are still thriving to this day. This brings me to what I find the most odd thing about the lake, and it's a log called the Old Man. A 30-foot tall tree stump vertically floating along the whole lake endlessly for nearly 130 years. With the first reported sighting of the Old Man in 1896, all the way to right now as it's still seen floating around today. Even the tour boats happen to know its location and scale around it. A team of scientists actually tracked the Old Man in 1938, saying it moved 60 miles in 3 months' time. Now times that by 4, then times that by 130, you get 31,200 miles. And that's more than most people's cars right now. It's also completely covered in moss underwater and just a bleached, creepy-looking tree stump on top, which people have tried to climb on over the years. But what's really the strangest thing about the Old Man is that it's said to be cursed, and when scientists decided to tie it up in 1988 to stop it from moving around because they were working on the lake, a whole storm started out of nowhere on a clear summer day that turned into a snowstorm in the middle of August. So soon as they could, the team released the Old Man, believing it was indeed cursed, and never tied it again.
In the 1980s, Mark Bactenica was part of a submarine exploration of Crater Lake. To avoid running into the Old Man out in the water, they tied him up on the shore. Bad idea.
It wasn't long after he was tied up that a storm blew in, and the surface of the lake got too rough for us to deploy and recover the submarine.
When it started to snow in August, superstition got the best of the scientists.
Our senior scientists went out quietly one evening and released the Old Man from his bondage.
And, wouldn't you know it, the weather cleared up right afterwards.
Then we have the disappearances and tragedies that seem to happen here quite often. From visitors who fall off the cliff spontaneously committing suicide, get caught in snowstorms and drive their cars into ravines, aircrafts falling out the skies, and even murders. A lot of people that disappear are hikers, and not in particularly the lake itself, but by the surrounding wilderness, which can get quite treacherous in the winter with a reported average of 43 feet of snow a winter season, as the national park is over 6,000 feet above sea level in elevation, and Oregon is already a cold state. But a lot of these disappearances go unsolved and remains are never found. The suicides are the strangest here as well, as most that are reported are regular people on hikes just getting possessed out of nowhere and jumping off the cliffs, like the 1947 case of Mr. Cornelius, who suddenly stopped hiking, calmly went over and handed his wife his belongings, and then without saying a word proceeded to emotionally just sit down and slide over the edge of a steep snow cliff leading down to the lake. He actually survived the fall with a broken leg, but then staggered to his feet, hobbled out to the lake's edge, and drowned himself as his wife looked on in confused horror. The wife would later claim that he had been in some sort of daze or trance during the incident. And there's many similar cases where presumably well people just hurled themselves off the cliffs or shot themselves in the head. One of the most bizarre events was where a couple was parked at a view when their brakes suddenly went out and sent their car off the caldera, killing both of them. And there's an average of about 7 deaths a year at or around the lake. In the 40s, there was actually an army base near the lake at Clement Falls, and they would report 2 or 3 aircraft that crashed or went missing over the lake every week, as aircraft wrecks in the area would continue to happen throughout the years. Also, there have been plenty of UFO sightings, even one caught on film as shown here. And in a 1997 report, a private flying pilot said he saw a military aircraft pursuing a UFO by the lake, and a loud boom was heard the same night all over western Oregon, where the news even reported it. And of course, to no one's surprise, at this point, it's one of the biggest Bigfoot sighting hotspots in the nation, as well including some stories that 2 Bigfoots had actually been killed in the area, one hit by car, one hit by train, and the government supposedly covered it up. Who knows how valid those stories are, but the people in the area swear by it. So what about the volcanic activity? Well, scientists say it can all explode again, and there's even hydrothermal vents they found along the bottom of the lake. Several times there's been bluish gray gas-like clouds coming out the water that mushroomed over the lake, and there was even a few earthquakes in the 90s, so volcanic activity is very much active below. And that's part of the reason why the lake has rarely ever frozen over. Just a few recorded times in history in 1949 and a couple times in 1985. However, the hydrothermal vents do pose a real danger of explosion, as seen with several other lakes around the world where gas accumulated underwater, causing catastrophic and deadly explosions. It's always a real threat in any volcanic lake. But despite all the danger and weirdness, Crater Lake is truly a breathtaking sight, especially at night, because it's so dark the skies look like you're actually in space, and I hear that's quite a sight, along with the blue waters reflecting in the sunlight during the day. So if you want to see it, you can visit the park, and you can even take a boat tour to Wizard Island during the summer. Just be careful and stay away from them steep caldera cliffs, and look out for the old man. Backstories, ladies and gentlemen.